Hey, I'm Olivia,
And hey, I'm Dad.
and you're listening to Soarin' Around WDW. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Soarin' Around WDW. We are back here today to wrap up our Disney at the World's Fair episode series, and we are excited to get into the attractions today that came out of the 1964 and 1965 World's Fair, and a little bit more behind the scenes of what happened at the World's Fair to help these attractions come to life over in the parks, and some of them that ended up not officially coming to the parks, but got dismantled and brought back in a different capacity. So, starting off, wanted to kind of get into the first attraction, which is Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. And Walt Disney obviously had a lifelong admiration for Abraham Lincoln. As a young boy in Kansas City, Missouri, he once dressed as Lincoln and recited the Gettysburg Address to every class in his school on Lincoln's birthday. By 1957, with Disneyland thriving, Walt proposed expanding Main Street USA with a new area called Liberty Street, which was supposed to be themed around colonial Boston at the dawn of the American Revolution, really tying into Disney's film Johnny Tremaine. A highlight of this expansion would have been the Hall of Presidents of the United States, featuring a film and lifelike figures of all U.S. presidents. And although Liberty Street was eventually shelved, development of the Hall of Presidents concept really did continue, and many of its ideas later shaped Liberty Square at Walt Disney World in 1971. Walt assigned the director James Algar to lead the project, and initially envisioned with wax figures, Walt really pushed for the presidents to move and speak. However, that technology really didn't exist yet, so Disney and his team created in-depth proposals to attract funding for research and development that was needed to bring this concept to life. When Robert Moses, the president of the 1964-1965 World's Fair, visited the Disney studio in 1963, he was able to witness an early test of the first audio-animatronics human figure, Abraham Lincoln. He was so smitten with the illusion that he reportedly exclaimed, "I won't open the fair without that exhibit." Moses was a fan of Walt Disney and therefore negotiated with the state of Illinois to sponsor and welcome the 16th President of the United States in lifelike audio animatronic form to their pavilion. At that time, the Lincoln figure was arguably Walt's most sophisticated creation, and there was a myriad of technical issues leading up to the fair's opening day. Walt, however, remained confident that the figure would perform successfully. So on May 2nd, 1964, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln officially debuted at the State of Illinois Pavilion and became one of the most popular attractions at the fair. The figure was so lifelike that some attendees incorrectly recounted how the president walked forward and shook hands with the crowd. Obviously, that didn't happen, but their memory seemed to think he was just that real. In 1961, Walt Disney saw the Hall of Presidents as a key attraction for the 1964 World's Fair and renamed it One Nation Under God. However, corporate sponsors rejected the project over cost and content concerns. To prove the show's potential, Disney asked his Imagineers to create a prototype figure, really focusing on his favorite president, Abraham Lincoln, and sculptor Blaine Gibson, who is obviously a huge part of Disney sculpting history, used an 1860 life mask of Lincoln to craft the figure's face, and by summer of 1961, it could stand from sitting. So when Illinois partnered with Disney to feature this Lincoln figure, they announced the project officially November 19th, 1963, which was the 100th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address. With the funding secured, James Algar led the team to fast-track the development, and Royal Dano was hired to voice Lincoln, with narration by Paul Frees, we know that name well as well, and music by Norman Buddy Baker. Early reactions were actually mixed. Some critics mocked the show and failed press preview in April 1964 due to technical glitches. Despite this, The Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln opened on April 22nd, 1964 to critical acclaim and actually drew 2.5 million visitors in its first season. Many believed that the figure was a live actor because of its lifelike movements, how we talked about earlier. Unfortunately, for a time, it did appear that the fair was the only opportunity to see Lincoln. For many years, it was feared that the figure was lost. Much to everyone's surprise, it was eventually discovered in an abandoned crate in California, of all places, and it found new life as the centerpiece of a 2005-2006 traveling exhibit called Behind the Magic 50 Years of Disneyland, along with the now infamous packing crate. This obviously still is in existence at Disneyland today, albeit an updated version. So it now rotates with the Walt Disney animatronic in the new show that debuted for the 70th anniversary of Disneyland, Walt Disney: A Magical Life. So, Dad, is this a show that when you went to Disneyland, was it there? And did you see, you've never seen this, is that correct?
No, I've never have seen Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. We went in 1970 summer, so I don't know. I guess it probably was there, right? It probably was there in the theater, but we just
Yeah.
never. We were busy, chasing other what we could probably consider more fun attractions for kids than something like that. Even
Yeah.
though I'm sure it was amazing, uh, but no, we never saw that.
Yeah, it looks like it came officially to Disneyland July 18th, 1965. So just, shortly after debuting at the World's Fair, and they obviously updated the animatronic quite a bit, in the meantime. And I've heard it's amazing. Similarly, I have also not seen it when I've been over at the parks, but have heard great things. And now that it's rotating with the Walt Disney show, it was something that we really wanted to do while we were there, but it was closed because they were getting everything ready for the 70th anniversary actual date in July, July 17th, for the Walt Disney piece to debut. And then, yeah, the plan is for it to rotate. So hopefully we're there next time it will be open and we'll be able to catch that. But there were several key Imagineers that were instrumental in creating Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. The first, as we talked a little bit about, was James Algar, who really led the team in developing the show. Bob Gurr designed the mechanical workings and animatronic figure of Abraham Lincoln for the attraction. Roger Brogy, Sam McKim, and Mark Davis were also involved in the project. Royal Dano provided the voice of Mr. Lincoln. Paul Frees did the narration and other incidental voices. Norman Buddy Baker composed the show's score. Tony Baxter and Valerie Edwards were also involved in shaping the figure's appearance. Walthall Rogers spent many hours in a harness built to record specific body movements for the animatronic. He had to act out precise arm waves, hand gestures, and other movements that he wanted the Lincoln figure to actually perform from the start of the show to its finish. Blaine Gibson's main job was obviously sculpting the beloved president's face, which he did an incredible job. Unfortunately, I wish Blaine Gibson was still around to do, Walt Disney's face, because that one I've heard from people is not quite exactly what it should be. Hopefully they'll get that either updated or fixed, but I've still heard that animatronic is pretty cool. But yeah, definitely a show that I've heard a lot about, heard a lot of positive things, especially just from audio-animatronics being totally unheard of really until this was like the first big one that Walt Disney did. So that is super cool. And then the Carousel of Progress is the next attraction on the list. So this is obviously a favorite of ours. And in the late 1950s, after Disneyland's initial success, Walt Disney planned to expand the Main Street USA area with two districts, the International Street and Edison Square. In Edison Square, guests would see a show called Harnessing the Lighting, hosted by an electromechanical man named Wilbur K. Watt, and was going to chronicle the evolution of electricity in the home from the late 19th century to the present and beyond, and show just how much electrical appliances, specifically GE appliances, had benefited the American life. And after each time period or act was over, the audience would get up and walk to the next one. But that idea was eventually scrapped. They decided not to do it. The Main Street expansion kind of fell by the wayside, and one reason was that the technology was not yet available to achieve what Walt Disney wanted. However, the idea stayed in his mind for the next few years, and GE still wanted to work with Disney, but a better outlet was needed. So during the development of Carousel of Progress, Disney Imagineers refined audio animatronic technology, building on earlier work from the Enchanted Tiki Room and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Led by Roger Brogy and Bob Gurr, the team also created rotating carousel theaters that moved the audience around a stationary set of stages, which which eliminated the need to walk between scenes and allowed for more seamless transitions. Rex Allen voiced the show's narrator or father, replacing the original character concept Wilbur K. Watt. Not fully aware of the project's scope, Allen later joked about how little he knew really going into this project. Walt Disney also asked Richard and Robert Sherman, obviously the famous Sherman brothers, to write a song that would unify the show's scenes. Inspired by Walt's optimism, they composed There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, which they later called Walt's personal theme song. Walt also provided one important element to the Carousel of Progress. The attraction was all but completed when Walt decided it needed one last touch, a playful animatronic dog added to each scene. Debuting as Progress Land at the 1964-1965 World's Fair, the attraction was a major hit. Despite seating over 200 guests every 4 minutes, wait times often exceeded an hour, and it was the first Disney attraction to display real-time wait times and even got a shaded queue in the area for the 1965 season. After the show, the guests could visit the second floor Sky Dome Spectacular, which was a dome projection show highlighting General Electric's innovations, including demonstrations of a controlled thermonuclear fusion. The dramatic effect included a flash and loud report as the deuterium atoms were fused at temperatures reaching up to 50 million degrees Fahrenheit, marking one of the first public displays of fusion energy. The Carousel of Progress opened with the Progressland Pavilion on the fair's opening day, April 22nd, 1964, and presented an entertaining narrative about electrical progress in America from the turn of the 20th century to the near future, as told by a quote-unquote typical American family of the time. An innovative ride system allowed the audience to move scene by scene around a central stage in a unique theater in the round. The successful attraction was among the highest attended at the fair, and General Electric agreed to sponsor the show when it moved to Disneyland in 1967. It relocated to Walt Disney World, obviously, in 1975, and General Electric continued its sponsorship until 1985. Obviously, it still sits in Walt Disney World in Tomorrowland today. Several key Imagineers played significant roles in the development of the Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. Obviously, Walt Disney himself was heavily involved, especially with the storytelling and smaller details of the attraction. Mark Davis was the lead character designer. Alice Davis designed the costumes. John Hench focused on character animation and movement. Herb Ryman, who was a lead designer and is subtly honored in the attraction. And Marty Sklar, another Disney legend, also had a hand in the attraction with a reference to him in the final scene. So, Dad, what do you remember about this attraction from its days, obviously over at Disney World? So I'm looking at the time frame here. So when you went to Disneyland, that would have been there because you were there in 1970 and it didn't move over to Disney World until 1975. Is that what I just said? Yeah, 1975. So is this one that you saw at Disneyland?
Yes, that's one we actually did see at Disneyland, which is pretty cool. It was about 5 years after the World's Fair closed in New York City, and I remember it quite well. Not as well, not as I don't remember it as well as a Haunted Mansion. Of course, that was my
Yeah.
all-time favorite. But I do remember going in that. I thought it was cool the way the guests rotate around. The stage is stationary. It rotates around, of course. And I do remember the catchy little song they had and everything to some degree. But then to have it come to the Magic Kingdom, I remember going in 1978 on our second trip to Walt Disney World. I was a senior in high school. I guess I've been in the spring of my senior year. And I remember going there with our whole family and going in there and seeing the Carousel of Progress again, about 8 years later. And I remember my sister saying something about, oh, they've changed a few things. I'm probably the final scene was changed a little bit or something. They could remember
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I love the attraction. Um, Not from just pure nostalgia, but I think it's just very well done. And the animatronics for its day were pretty impressive. And it tells kind of a fun story. I always find it entertaining, and to the point where it's a great place to go. If it's really hot, you just want to hang out in a nice air conditioned place for 20 minutes. It's a good place to go hang out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can be a nice little nap thing, but I have always loved this attraction. I think, the song itself, honestly, to me, for this being a non-IP attraction and not related to any movies, the Sherman Brothers obviously did a ton of work for the park, and It's a Small World is a big song, but this is one of my favorite songs. I think just, the meaning of it and it's not super, super lengthy or anything, but it's just a really nice theme and message to it. It's maybe one of my favorite theme park songs that I really like. Would, love to have it on a sign in our Disney room sometime. We've been looking at different, actually, like things on Etsy and stuff, small shops that make signs out of the lyrics of this song because it's just so unique. So it's, yeah, definitely one of my favorite Sherman Brothers songs and probably one of the more popular. I mean, I guess like they're maybe not because then I think of like some of the songs in Haunted Mansion and Pirates that weren't IP related either. But yeah, there's some really popular ones. So, but this is a really, really, really cool one. But yeah, that last scene, I think it's so funny. Like now everything that's in there, it's supposed to be the future and it's almost like the present. It's like the futuristic video game that they have that he's playing is very much like how they have, the more virtual reality games that exist now. And then talking to the oven is almost like an Alexa. We have things like that now. So it's almost like what could they update to make it even more of the future? And they've done little updates to that last scene here or there, more of like what's present in the scene, not necessarily the content. But do you think that's something that they'll eventually update, or will they just leave it as it is because it's a classic at this point?
That's a great question. We always joke about how you're right. There are some things that are kind of, the VR stuff and things like that are popular today, but I think that was all kind of from like the 1990s. I think a lot of it, if I remember right. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. And they talked about shuttering this thing, closing it down, what, like 10 years ago. Like, oh, this is going to be open seasonally, and then they're just going to shut it down. And people were very upset about that. And not that that makes any difference because what they did to Mr. Toad, but that's another conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
But yeah, I think that last scene, they haven't updated it at all this time. Are they going? I don't have a crystal ball. They might do something with it, but it might be years. So if I was a bet man, I'd say they're probably just going to leave it alone and just maintain it enough to keep the show running and keep the animatronics running properly. And that's probably all they're going to invest in it at this point. That's my guess.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they probably won't invest more money in it. And if they ever were to get rid of it, I feel like I don't think they would because it's such a classic and Walt had such a hand in it. I think if anything, I could potentially see them moving it back to Disneyland in some capacity, maybe. But I don't know. I feel like it's been there for so long at Disney World now. I mean, 75 to now, so 50 years that it has sat where it is, and the theater's kind of in a good location. It has the theme of Tomorrowland, the future, technically, even though, like we said, it's a little outdated. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear people's different opinions on that. But I hope it doesn't go anywhere. It's a nice attraction. I know Regan wishes it would just because from a challenge perspective, it's a big time eater, but it's a really good show. And just thinking about the beginning of Audio-Animatronics and how they did that show and the idea of a rotating theater, it was just all very innovative. So it's really cool to see how early they started that back in the 60s. And then moving to the next attraction of It's a Small World. So, with three different shows already in development, Walt Disney's unique brand of entertainment was already very well represented among the World Fair's planned 650 acres of experiences and displays. But a late addition to the creative lineup, which beautifully exemplified the fair's theming of peace through understanding, would become one of the most charming attractions in Disney history and thrill more than 10 million children of all ages during its premiere in New York. The idea for It's a Small World had played in Walt Disney's mind for many years. He wanted to create some sort of show that featured the children of the world singing in harmony and peace. It all began in 1963 when Pepsi Cola Company approached Walt Disney about creating a salute to children and an exhibit to benefit the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. And with three other projects already underway, the year leading up to the fair was full of creative challenges for Walt Disney that required a symphony of people with many diverse skills. At first, a team of representatives visited the U.S.'s top companies offering Disney services for the fair. WED was hired to build attractions for Ford Motors, General Electric, and the state of Illinois. In February of 1963, representatives of Pepsi Cola spoke with Admiral Joe Fuller, who was a Disney Imagineer, and Pepsi explained that they would want to sponsor a pavilion at the upcoming New York World's Fair in conjunction with UNICEF. Walt's salute to the children of the world would be a perfect match. Although, with the World's Fair opening date only a year away, Fowler turned them down. There simply wasn't enough time to undertake such an enormous project, especially since the Walt Disney Company was already committed to three other fair projects. But when Walt Disney learned that Fowler had sent Pepsi away empty-handed, he was furious. He let Fowler know of his displeasure and told Pepsi that Disney was up to the challenge for another attraction. Once the exhibit was designed and fabricated, a mock-up was put together at the Disney Studios in California. Walt Disney would board a boat on wheels and elevated to the proper height and be pushed through the attraction to ensure that the sight lines and all of the details were exactly right, which is just incredible if you think about it. In March 1963, construction began in New York on the show building, and as the fair deadline grew shorter, the mock-up, complete or not, was sent to New York to be tested and finished. Numerous problems faced Walt Disney and the company once everything arrived to New York. To install the attraction, crews living off of black coffee in the morning and martinis for lunch worked 7 days a week to make the deadline. The original name of the attraction was supposed to be called The Children of the World, but after the Sherman Brothers wrote their song, the name was changed to It's a Small World. The fair opened on April 22nd, 1964, and It's a Small World was an immediate success. The ride cost 95 cents for adults and 60 cents for children, with the funds all going to UNICEF. Over the next 2 years, over 10 million guests visited the pavilion. In a rather short period of time, theme park technology was advanced greatly, with a minimal expenditure to the Walt Disney Company. By dealing with corporations and stretching his Imagineer's creativity, valuable lessons were learned, and the artistic talents of countless individuals made It's a Small World an international kaleidoscope and entertaining reality. Rolly Crump was a big player here, and he was part of the large kinetic sculpture in the front of the building that was called the Tower of the Four Winds. This was 120 feet high, and it was a steel mobile that had over 50 moving objects that turned and rotated in the wind. Its endless movement represented the constant energy of young children, and this piece of art became one of the fair's landmarks. Mary Blair, who designed the attraction's whimsical style and palette, color style and palette, Mark Davis, who designed the scenes and the characters, and Alice Davis, who designed the costumes for all the dolls. The Sherman Brothers were obviously the duo who composed the song for the attraction. And Walt knew all along that once the fair closed, he would move It's a Small World to Disneyland. Construction started in June 1965 on what would eventually become It's a Small World's new home in Anaheim. Unfortunately, the expense of moving the Tower of the Four Winds that Rolly Crump had created proved to be prohibitive. After two successful seasons in New York, It's a Small World relocated to Disneyland and opened May 28, 1966, and was sponsored by Bank of America to great fanfare. Besides the Disney and Bank of America dignitaries, there were 36 foreign consular officials, more than 800 members of the press, and the International Children's Choir of Long Beach. In addition, a parade of local folk dancing groups and marching bands also participated. Walt Disney joined children from 16 ethnic groups to pour flasks of water from the seven seas and nine major lagoons into the waterway for the attraction. This water was authentic and had been flown in at significant expense from different countries, which I always think is a cool thing that they do. They did a similar thing when they did the last Pirates attraction and poured water from all the different Pirates attractions in the world, which is super cool. It's just a nice little touch. And in the past decades, It's a Small World was built in almost every Disney theme park across the globe. Obviously in Disneyland, at Magic Kingdom, Tokyo Disneyland in Japan, Disneyland Park in France, and Hong Kong Disneyland in China. So almost at every single theme park. So this attraction obviously is very, very popular. It's one of the ones that people either love or hate. You either love it and it's a favorite and you go on it every time, or it's a skip almost every time the song gets stuck in your head and it drives you crazy. But I think I've gotten a new appreciation of this attraction going to Disneyland because their version of the attraction to me is just unmatched. I mean, I really would be fine with Magic Kingdom in Disney World getting rid of the attraction and doing something different because it just doesn't even hold a candle to Disneyland's version. I just think their version is so much better. It's obviously the original, but they've done a really good job adding different little things into it that my girls appreciated, like little IP characters that they recognized in the dolls. I do like our ending scene better with the Ferris wheel and all that, is my favorite part of the Disney World version, but the rest of the attraction is fine. But the Disneyland one, all throughout, is just really, really neat. And I love how it's indoor and outdoor, which probably wouldn't work in Florida because it rains all the time. But what did you think about this attraction, Dad? Did you go on this back when you went to Disneyland?
We did. And I remember it being just a real bright, cheery, I was 10. So I just remember the outside of it being really cool. If I remember right, the boat ride kind of started outside. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then kind of worked its way inside, right?
Yep.
So considerably different than the Florida version. Um, but yeah, I love the ride only when you kids were young, young kids or
Yeah.
young grandkids, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever that age. Sure, because you just watch them watch all the characters singing and everything, all the dolls singing. But as an adult, if it's just Doreen and me, we definitely take a hard pass on that and move to something else.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, again, the one at Disney World, I'm like, I love the whole like color scheme of the ride. I think, Mary Blair did an incredible job on this attraction and all the Disney Imagineers, just everything they put together. If you guys follow us on Instagram, you might have seen that I was in a video for another group, Idiot's Guide to Imagineering's little celebration for the 70th of Disneyland and recorded my video in our playroom. And we have a huge It's a Small World mural. I'll have to post that maybe as our throwback picture for this episode that my mom painted. And I love it. I just think it just reminds me so much of the Disney parks. I love that mural. I love like the whole different color scheme and palette of It's a Small World. I think it's super fun. But yeah, it's so funny. In Magic Kingdom, I was like, it's fine. But at Disneyland, it's just such a cool ride. So, and I love that it's one that he did at the World's Fair and it's been moved and stuff like that. That's super neat. So, yeah, it's one that I appreciate but understand why people don't love it and wouldn't necessarily want to sit on it all day. The next and last attraction that they did over at the World's Fair is the Magic Skyway. And although it's less familiar in name, the Magic Skyway was another Walt Disney special. And it was the Ford Motor Company got together with Walt Disney and was one of the more prominent exhibitors at the fair, and the company responded to Walt's proposal for an attraction allowing visitors to join the journey through time in actual Ford cars. In 1965, Walt Disney's ambitious Magic Skyway, one of 4 attractions that he created for this fair, returned for its final season, featuring real Ford cars gliding along a track through scenes of dinosaurs, cavemen, and futuristic cities. It was the only ride narrated by Walt himself, which is pretty cool. The script recordings were challenging, revealing a rare glimpse of Walt's more human side, as recalled by Marty Sklar. The attraction, housed in the striking Ford Pavilion, designed by Welton Beckett, combined cutting-edge audio animatronics with a massive ride system and developed by Imagineers Bob Gurr and Roger Broggie. Guests rode in Ford vehicles, including 12 debut Mustangs, through scenes representing humanity's progress. Its popularity led to 3-hour wait times, which is crazy, sometimes just to ride in a Mustang. Despite its success, tension grew between Disney and Ford, and budget cuts led to ride issues. Ford ultimately declined to continue the partnership. Unlike the other Disney Fair attractions, Magic Skyway never moved to Disneyland, and its legacy, however, lived on. Dinosaurs found a home in Disneyland's primeval world, and the ride system inspired the People Mover. It's the popular attraction titled the Magic Skyway first took visitors to prehistoric times, including a climactic battle between two roaring dinosaurs. So is this an attraction that you have read or seen anything about, Dad? Like any pictures or video footage from this ride? This was something I didn't even know existed.
Yes, I've seen a lot of different things that I've researched over the years because you mentioned Bob Gurr, one of the I don't know if he's really one of the Imagineers. I guess he was considered Imagineer. He wasn't an ex-artist. He was a I think he worked for Ford as a young person, like right out of high school, and like body design and stuff for Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
And then he started working for Walt Disney in the 50s when they opened up I'm sorry, Disneyland in 1955, and he is still alive. He's like in his early 90s, and he's spry as he just is really with the program. He does these tours and everything. He's not
Yeah, I've
employed by the
seen
kids
him.
anymore. Yeah, Bob Gurr is, and they just did a documentary about Bob Gurr that I want to see. It's supposed to be really good about all the different vehicles. He is involved in the Doom buggies, involved in the monorail building the monorail system, tied in with that, and a variety of other attractions all over Disneyland and Disney World that he has his name on, that he helped design the vehicles. He's known more for designing the vehicles, the Main Street vehicles, a lot of those things. Bob Gurr had his hand in all that stuff, and so he's a real legend. Yeah, I remember seeing. We actually watched a little bit of the documentary tonight before we got on the podcast here, and with Grandma Gloria, who was at the World's Fair. She went a number of times, I found out, and we can talk more about that a little bit later. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I know the diorama, I guess, is at Disneyland. When you go on the train ride, you see the diorama they pulled out with the dinosaurs and everything is from the World's Fair, from that
Yep.
attraction, the Magic Skyway. And so, yeah, I think that Ford Mustang was introducing the Ford Mustang and some other Ford convertibles at the time that you rode in, and it was tied in with helping design the People Mover, and even had a little bit of play, I guess, to some of the Doom buggies, some of the way the Doom buggies operate a little bit too, to some degree, from what I gathered from my research anyway. But yeah, pretty cool attraction.
Yeah, definitely a very cool attraction. And I think something that they still have pieces of, like you said, throughout the parks. We'll have to do a little deep dive, like Disney Legend episode on Bob Gurr at some point, because yeah, he's a really, really cool guy. That would be cool. So the Disney attractions were obviously some of the most popular exhibits at the fair, and there were 135,000 visitors per day that visited Disney's four exhibits during the first season alone. At the conclusion of the fair, which lasted about 2 years, nearly 47 million people had experienced at least one of the four Disney exhibits. These projects also advanced Disney's use of audio animatronics and helped shape future rides like Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion through systems like the Omnimover. Perhaps the most important, the fair proved that Disney's entertainment had national and potentially global appeal. The success really helped validate Walt's plans for the quote unquote Florida project, which eventually became Walt Disney World. Though Walt Disney passed before its opening, his vision really lived on in Epcot and the Hall of Presidents, both directly shaped by the different world fairs that he was a part of. Ultimately, the 1964 and 1965 World's Fair wasn't just a showcase of new attractions, it was Walt's bold experiment in the future of themed entertainment and urban planning, laying the groundwork for Disney's continued evolution long after his time. Most of the pavilions were constructed for the fair. They ended up that were constructed for the fair ended up being demolished within 6 months following the fair's close, which is so sad. Only a handful of pavilions survived, and some of them deteriorated due to neglect. But obviously, Walt Disney took care of his projects, and they are still mostly in use throughout the parks in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it was really cool to get to learn a little bit more about the World's Fair and just Disney's relationship with it, how he really brought a lot to the table to the World's Fair overall. But like you mentioned, your mother-in-law, our Grandma Gloria, she got to go to the World's Fair with your wife Doreen when she was young. So what did Grandma Gloria remember about her experience at the 1964 to 1965 World's Fair?
Well, apparently the World's Fair was in Queens, uh, one of the boroughs of New York City, and that's where they lived. So they said they went all the time. It
Oh,
wasn't like once
cool.
or twice. They probably like when we were at the first year we lived in Florida and went to Disney World. It was
Yeah, like
probably
every
like
other
us,
weekend.
right? Every other weekend. So she remembers it very fondly. She said there was very well attended. She did go on. She did see great moments with Mr. Lincoln a number of times. She thought it was amazing. Everyone was just amazed the way they kept, and some people thought it was a real person up there at some point. She went on It's a Small World with my wife, Doreen, and Doreen was just young. I don't want to give away ages here on the podcast.
Yeah, fair enough.
She was young enough where she screamed so much they shut the ride down. They thought there was a problem.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh, that's so
So
funny.
Doreen doesn't remember much about the fair. She was very young, but her mother, Grandma Gloria, shared that with me. And the other attraction she went on was Carousel of Progress. She said she remembers that. She went to go back to see that many times also. Her and her mom and dad at the time, of course, went with them. And she said it was amazing. The World's Fair was absolutely amazing. And it was so well attended. And you could never see all of it with just one or two visits. You'd have to go a number of times. And so since they lived close, it was relatively reasonably priced to go. They went quite often. And she said everybody dressed up. The men were in ties and sport coats, and the
Oh,
ladies were in
wow.
dresses. And that's the way it was back then. And it's New York City. It was a real class act. People dressed up back then. Even to go to Disneyland back in the day, see a lot of people
Yeah.
guys wearing ties, and the ladies wore dresses and nice hats. And it was just a different time. But yeah, said it was wonderful. So it was kind of neat. And so I showed her some of the video actually this evening of some of it, and she said she could remember many of the larger attractions that were there that were Disney and of course non-Disney attractions. She saw a lot of different things over her time there, and said it was wonderful.
Okay, wow. That's really cool. Yeah, it's neat to get to hear from somebody that got to go, especially someone that got to go not just once, but like you said, multiple times.
Multiple
That's
times.
really
You know.
cool. Was there anything else from the World's Fair that she remembered, like in particular, other than like Disney attractions that she talked about?
She remembers the big tire. She said it was a large like car tire. I mean large, where a Ferris wheel actually was tied into the center of it and went around it.
Oh,
I mean, it was
wow.
huge. It was like, I don't know, 6 or 7, 8 stories tall, I guess, real tall. And I've
Yeah.
seen pictures of it on there. She said there was a lot of different types of native dancers from different island countries. She couldn't remember exactly where, but like South Pacific type dancing, they would have dancing like, from that area and probably from all over. We didn't get a chance to talk at length about it, but she just did remember seeing a lot of other, in every state, I believe every state of the United States had a pavilion. Every country, I can't say every country had a pavilion, but a number of countries, of course, from all over the world, your major countries had pavilions. And then you had all your corporate sponsors like, Uniroyal and Ford and General Motors, and they had all their pavilions. They said it was just, it made Epcot look small. Let's put it that way. You could have put
Yeah.
many Epcots in that World's Fair, many of them. It was
That's so
that big.
crazy.
Yeah,
Wow, just a big space. And it's like so interesting too that both World's Fairs that Walt Disney was involved in, like where it's at that same site,
yeah,
just like a massive amount of land that now is, Queens is like a pretty big neighborhood area in New York City that's filled with people and everything now, not much empty space anymore, which is crazy.
right.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that wraps up everything about the World's Fair. That was cool to kind of get to learn some more about the history. Hopefully, you guys as listeners got to learn some more as well. Now we're going to get into our Would You Rather for the week, which is the new thing that we've been doing in this new year of episodes. So this week's Would You Rather is, would you rather wait in a 4-hour line for Rise of the Resistance only for it to break down just before you board, or drink Beverly soda as your only beverage for an entire park day?
Wow, both of those are pretty rough.
Yeah, they are pretty rough.
Talk about a disappointment waiting for 4 hours for Rise of the Resistance, which is one of my favorite attractions over at the studios there. Uh, I can't do the Beverly all day. That would kill me. One sip kills me. I can't imagine drinking that all day. But
Yeah.
you'd be in the ER, right, Olivia?
Yeah, that'd be rough. I feel like I'd be super dehydrated because I just wouldn't drink.
Yeah, I would have to say I'd have to wait with all the and hang out with all the other disappointed people when it breaks down before we go in. I've had things like that happen before, but I've never waited more than probably an hour and a half for any attraction ever at Disney World in my life. I just never have and never again living so close. You're like, oh, we'll check it out next time we come, right? It's like we're not
Yeah.
going to wait. That's
I
kind of
feel
what
like
it
the
was.
only thing we waited really long for, I felt like Expedition Everest that first time we went when Regan bailed was like 2 hours, but maybe that was like my kid brain thinking it was
Yeah,
that long.
yeah, I don't think so. I think that might have been maybe 90 minutes, maybe. But I know for a fact I've never waited with you or anybody else. It might have been 90 minutes would be the max I've ever waited for a ride. But that's
Yeah.
again, we just had the luxury of coming back some other time or
Yeah.
park hopping somewhere else and park hopping back or something, like we did all the time. So
Yeah, definitely. At least the line for Rise of the Resistance has a lot to look at, and it's like an interactive,
yeah,
kind of a thing
right.
for part of it. Not for four
Sure.
hours, but yeah, I feel like I would have to go with you there because, yeah, Beverly is disgusting. And if listeners, you don't know what we're talking about, if you go to Club Cool or like the Coca-Cola station in Epcot, they have different beverages from different countries. And the Beverly is one that people say you either love it or you hate it. And I feel like people who say they love it are lying, but they're lying to themselves. I don't I don't know. Just doesn't seem like that could be true because it is so disgusting. It's definitely not a favorite, that's for sure. Okay, and then our trivia question for this week. The Belgium village was a beautiful replica with cobblestone streets and shops at the World's Fair. The obviously big thing that came out of this village was the famous Belgian waffles, which was not an ingredient in the waffles. Strawberries, ice cream, powdered sugar, or obviously waffle. Is it ice cream?
I would have to think ice cream, but that's just my thought.
Because I thought the whole point was it was like strawberries with powdered sugar and waffle. Let me see.
Okay,
I feel like this was a silly question. Yeah, it's ice cream.
ice cream. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we got one right. Yay.
It was hard to find like World Fair specific trivia questions. I don't
Right.
know. Some of these trivia things I find, I'm like, some of them are kind of weird. Okay, well, that is everything for the World's Fair. Thank you guys so much for listening. We have a couple of fun content things coming up for you guys. So just stay tuned as we get into a couple of new series and different fun episodes in our new year. But thank you guys again for taking time out of your week to join us. And if you want to be featured on an episode, go ahead and send us a would you rather question. We'd love to shout you out if you want to be. Some people want to be anonymous, which the last couple episodes they didn't want to be shouted out, so we did not shout them out. But if you want to be shouted out or if you have a show and want us to promote your show, let us know and we can do that in our would you rather section. But again, thanks so much for listening and have a great week.
See you next week.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at SoarinAroundWDW Pod, where we share fun reels, throwback photos, and dive into our old versus new debates. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. And for our Spotify listeners, a follow and a 5-star review would mean the world. If you're listening on Apple, hit that 5-star button and leave us a written review as well. Thanks again for joining us. See you next time.